Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 1, titled Strange New Worlds, on 4K Blu ray. Alright, I was very hesitant to watch this show, mainly because I saw Star Trek Picard, Season 1, and it had really great character moments, but for the most part, the writing was an absolute travesty, and the story. So I was like, oh, maybe new Star Trek is not good and not for me. So I avoided this for a long time. But I started hearing from people that I trust that it's actually good and actually feels like Star Trek, which I was still doubtful. And then one thing I was worried about is if it would have like what the other new Star Treks have, which is just more graphic content, like more graphic violence, bigger swear words, and like sexual stuff. And so again, I kind of just avoided it. But this episode is, I think this entire show is rated TV PG, and in the beginning there's a part with Captain Pike where he has a friend over, and you see her bare back while she's in bed after she woke up, and then later you see Spock and T'Pring, and they're about to do something, but then they don't, but it's like really obviously implied, but you don't see anything. So that's the extent of it. So that was good. And then it had just like a good level of PG sci-fi violence. I guess it did have a little bit of scary Captain Pike's face melting a little bit. But the feel of this show was very different compared to just like the dark, horrible graphicness and just like dystopianness of Picard Season 1. So this one actually started feeling like old 60s Star Trek. And so I'm going to review the first episode, Strange New Worlds, Episode 1, called Strange New Worlds, as if it's a book club and it's my turn. So the camera's been following this lady, and they're talking about how they're seeing a spaceship, and number one's giving a really cool speech in the background, and then she turns around and you get
children's stories and science fiction.
You reveal that they're aliens, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's aliens. And it's like, wow, they're aliens, and it seems like the whole scene was like Earth seeing aliens, but then she flips around and it's like, plot twist, she's actually an alien. But it totally threw me off because it's like, but she's wearing a tie. So I don't know, I think that's weak costume design. honestly, another reason that I chose to watch this show is because they did release it on 4K Blu-ray, and I wanted to support that because I want to tell them that I will buy the 4Ks, because supposedly there's a rumor that if you buy the 4Ks of this, that possibly you could get 4Ks of the original series and Next Generation, which would be so awesome. But yeah, I heard from James over at In Search of Physical Media that the 4Ks were incredible looking. I saw his screenshots versus the Blu-rays, and I was just like, yes! I mean, I had pre-ordered the 4K already, but when I saw his video, it just cemented it. I was just like, yes, let's do this. So yeah, I wanted to watch the series because it came out on 4K disc. I was tempted to get Paramount Plus and watch it on there, but I just never did. I don't really like streaming, and so I blind bought the discs because they're on 4K, and I will do pretty much everything. So I haven't seen Discovery, and I don't really want to. However, this show, so all I've seen of this is just episode 1. But this show's making me want to find some way to watch just the Captain Pike Enterprise clips from Discovery, because I haven't seen it. So I'm watching this with having not seen Discovery, being like, am I going to be lost, or are they going to exposition me up to speed? Which I honestly think they did. I think anytime it was pertinent, they had one or two lines that are like, hey, this thing happened, here you go. But if you watch Discovery, you'd be like, oh yeah, I was totally there. But if you didn't, you'd be like, okay, there's some background there. So I don't feel like I missed anything not watching Discovery. My first exposure to the cast of this show was in a short film called Q&A. It's called A Short Trek, where Spock is first going aboard the Enterprise, and him and number one get stuck in the elevator, or what, it's not turbo lift, whatever the Star Trek version is of the elevator. They get stuck in there, and it's so good. It is so good. I was like, oh my gosh, I want more of this cast. And so that was my first exposure to this cast, and then I was just like, I want more of that. So I'm excited for this show. I'll talk a little bit about another thing that I was worried about as well in the show that I had heard about when I get there. Meanwhile, we see Captain Pike in this rustic old cabin watching The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. And it talks about how they've created a group of people that protects all planets, and it's like, oh, that's kind of like the Federation. Also, guess who directed this movie that Captain Pike is watching, The Day the Earth Stood Still? Let's see if you can tell. So, 1951 version. Can you see right there? Boop. Robert Weiss. Recognize him? That's the director of Star Trek The Motion Picture. So there's kind of a cameo of one of his movies in this series. So it's kind of fun. Also, the fact that this clip of the movie is talking about a group of people that protects all planets is like, hey, it's like the Federation. So it's like kind of double interesting cameo. I got this little guy watching me or hanging out with me. What are you doing? Are you eating weird stuff? Quit eating weird stuff. All right, so random thing. So on the nightstand of the in his bedroom of the above view shot of the girl's back I was talking about, there's a book there, and it actually reminded me of my copy of the Bhagavad Gita. It looks almost exactly like it. It's not, but anyway, reminded me of that. So one thing I think that Star Trek does that's fun is the characters in it like romanticize the past, and they'll have physical books, and like he's watching this old movie, and he's actually hand making food instead of using a replicator or something.
Really? Again?
Come on, it's class.
Anyway, so one, his hair and beard are incredible right there, but like you'll see Picard reading a physical book, or you'll see physical books here, or he's making food. Like they romanticize like a simpler, less technological time, while at the same time being the most technologically advanced we've ever been. So I think that's kind of interesting. Also, the stuff they're romanticizing is stuff we have now. So it's almost like they're trying to get you to appreciate the simpler things right now by showing these futuristic people enjoying it even more anachronistically. So I must say the 4K with Dolby Vision of this show is so incredible to look at. This is a beautiful show to look at. This is a good looking 4K disc. All right, this shot right here reminds me of 2001 Space Odyssey with the lined up planets shot, but it also actually reminds me of the very end of Star Trek The Motion Picture with the same kind of thing where the Enterprise is coming at you with a really cool lined up Earth shot. But look at this. See how perfectly lined up that is? Look at that. Isn't that nice? And they have the fun old 60s like whistly sci-fi spacey sound in the background. These two Vulcans talking to each other
I've been away, which can
does not seem very logical.
Query.
These guys are like just they're pushing it with the emotion thing going on here. I feel like old Vulcans are always like trying to suppress their emotions, and right here they're like just barely below the surface, like borderline Romulan. Speaking of emotional Vulcans, this little guy shows up and is like, does not sound logical and emotionless when he's telling them to do that somewhere else. So this is actually Gregory Peck's grandson, and he's got the deep voice just like Gregory Peck. Okay, I want to talk about the Spock hair for a minute here. And we're going to see it in some other shots. But traditional Spock hair is just like combed forward, cut, and it's very forward, and it's like a bowl cut almost, but like up higher with the pokey sideburns. And they've done something interesting here. Let me see if I can look at that. So you can see it kind of combed forward on the sides. And then it's almost like a faux hawk that they've let fall down right there. So they still keep the bangs like flat, but it's like kind of coming together in like a laying down faux hawk with the sides. And then there's a lot more movement and texture all the way across, instead of Leonard Nimoy's, where it was just kind of like combed forward and like very kind of stiff and weird looking. But this kind of is like still like stylish and fun while still maintaining like most of the order of the Leonard Nimoy version. So I just think it's a very interesting new take on his hairstyle. We'll look at it more later. All right, listen to Captain Pike's, the way he asked this question to Spock. Love this.
Spock, are you naked? No, Captain.
Anyway, we find out that what's his name? Ethan Peck is he's got some pecs. Anyway, I just love the sound of his voice. He's like, Spock, are you naked? But look at Captain Pike's fancy new hair. Look at this. He doesn't have the pointy sideburns. They're kind of flat on the bottom. So they're continuing the tradition of awesome Star Trek production design, just showing detailed stuff where you can see it if you pause it. But he's reading the file of his temporary number 1 on his ship, and what stands out is the Gorn. If you remember the lizard guy that Kirk fights in super slow motion, this show turns them into like a freaking terrifying race. All right, here's another shot of his hair where you can see that he's got it kind of worked forward. It still has the strict bangs, but it has a lot more movement. And then coming forward, instead of being just coming forward flat like Leonard Nimoy's, it has movement as it comes forward. Does that make sense? This shot, you can really see how it's like, as he combs it forward, it's like wavy going forward, which is quite a different take on Spock. Also, I never thought I would see in my lifetime the third actor playing Spock. I mean, I am all for more Spock. Leonard Nimoy was timeless and amazing, but I love the character, and if they can bring him back and do cool stuff with him, I am all for that. So far this guy's doing great. Boop. So Spock and the captain are in the captain's super swanky quarters, which includes a bonfire. And apparently Captain Pike has seen his own death, which, if you remember the original series, you eventually see Captain Pike and his face looks horrible, and he's in like this wheelchair thing, and he like can't talk, and it just looks horrible. And so this series is implying that prior to the start of this episode, that something happened where he saw his own death, or where his life as you know it ends. Again, so I don't know if they already showed that in another show, but it doesn't matter because this show is giving you enough exposition to understand the weight that he's carrying. And then Spock gives him an amazing Spock speech and an amazing Star Trek speech. It's very, very motivational and cool. Listen to this.
Suffering can be transformed into insight. You must seek out the good in knowing your own death. Use it to be the man you most essentially are. And who's that, Spock? The captain.
So, first of all, Anson Mount is doing, or I don't know how you pronounce his name. Anyway, he's doing an awesome job. He's a great actor. I really haven't seen him in much. And then little Peck Jr. there has such an awesome, like, Gregory Peck voice. So that trait got passed on. Anyway, that little speech of Spock telling him that he can turn the suffering into wisdom and everything is really good. And that's what Star Trek is all about, is people trying to be better in their situation. So I just was feeling more and more hope as I'm watching this show that it's not going to suck like most of season 1 of Picard did. So it's cool watching all these characters meet each other, so we can meet them at the same time. And there's some familiar faces.
It's a pleasure to see you again.
So you got Dr. Umbega right there.
Of course, you had to certify her for duty.
I received the orders, Captain.
Which you may recognize from Dune, the good version. Well, we'll just say the 2021 version. Anyway, Dr. Umbega, is so cool to see him in this show because it's a prequel to Kirk's Star Trek. And so it's just cool to see like all those familiar faces. Right before Bones arrived, you've got Dr. Umbega. And actually, Dr. Umbega worked with Bones as well. And then we're about to see another familiar face, or familiar name, different face. You got Nurse Chapel.
Nurse Chapel is on civilian exchange from the Stanford Moor.
Who was previously played by Majel Barrett, Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry's wife. So it's cool that her character's back. I think she was constantly pining over Spock in the original series, if I remember correctly. Okay, so coming up here is something else that I had heard about this show, that honestly kept me away from it just because I was so sick of seeing it. Pike comes down here, and he's in between these two basically warring factions or competing factions, I guess. And he's like, you guys are about to destroy each other like we did on Earth. And so he shows them kind of the start of the Civil War, and then he tells them about the Eugenics War and then World War III, and actually shows some cool clips of World War III. But the part that was kind of keeping me away from the show is I was just like, oh my gosh, they're going to show January 6th riot stuff, and they're going to show current political stuff, and it's just like, oh, I'm so sick of it. And so there's a little bit of
Our
footage.
conflict also started with a fight for freedom.
You see a little bit
We called it the
of
Second Civil War. Then the
bit of
Eugenics
red
War.
hats in there,
Finally,
which again is stupid, but that's it. That's literally what I just showed is all they show, and then it's how they tie it in and how they use it that I think makes me okay with it. Because honestly, like I said, I was annoyed to see it. I was annoyed to hear about it. But then they, like I said, they go on to talk about how then we had a Civil War, Eugenics War, and then World War III. And then they do one of my favorite things in sci-fi movies, which is showing Earth get the crap nuked out of it. He talks about how in World War III they destroyed 30% of the Earth population. But look at all these cool nukes going off.
global suicide. What we gave him.
It reminds me of the end of Terminator 3, when you just see all these nukes just flying everywhere, destroying stuff. Not that I want that to happen, I just love seeing it in movies. It's also fun to imagine like trying to survive that and what life would be like after everything got nuked. All right, maybe I said that weird. It's not fun to imagine. It's interesting to imagine. I don't know. But they show Earth after World War III, and it looks awful. It looks volcanic almost. Is that a gigantic crater in like Mexico? There's like multiple craters there.
Life is to be worn
So
glorious.
he's giving this speech to these people.
Till our last moment. The future is what we make it.
And all these people that he had talked to up to this point are listening to his speech, and it's actually really cool. But so I actually like the message of this episode, which is a message of peace and of overcoming your differences and not nuking each other into oblivion. The crazy thing is though, in Star Trek world, the world that they come from did nuke itself into oblivion. So it's cool to see Star Trek that they've like risen above all their differences, but they did it after like killing themselves. So it's a little, it's not like in Star Trek they look back to our time and be like, oh yeah, and then we got better and now we're in space. It's like, no, then we all killed each other and then we got better, then we're in space. And it's like, oh man. So like if I'm in your timeline, like I'm gonna get nuked. Anyway, he's using the lesson of 21st century Earth to teach this other planet how to not nuke themselves, which is pretty cool. Okay, so they come back from their little space mission and they go to the space station, which is actually pretty cool looking. It's got like these little like terraformy little earthly bubble things. Like you can see like mountains inside of them and like vegetation and stuff. And it's like, wow, that's so cool. And then you can see in the background, that right there, I'm pretty sure that is Europa. Or maybe Titan. I think it's Europa. All right, so it turns out that's Jupiter in the background. And look at those big bubbles with the mountains and all the trees. Look at that huge bubble. So it turns out that this episode carries on the long-honored tradition of having cool space stuff by Jupiter. So like 2010, the year we make contact, and also Silent Running specifically. Like this looks exactly like Silent Running, like these big forest bubbles. Like it's seriously right out of that movie, which is pretty cool. This is probably the coolest space station in all of Star Trek. Like this is so awesome. Like look at this. This is visually beautiful. So this TV show is like looks expensive and cheap at the same time, kind of like Mandalorian does. But I love this background. This is such a cool setting. It's so cool to imagine like if you were living out there, you could still have like cool foresty stuff, but then you're like out in space with Jupiter. Look who shows up here.
Captain.
Samuel Kirk.
Samuel Kirk.
Welcome to Enterprise. How's the family?
All fine, sir.
That is James Tiberius Kirk's older brother, which I swear I didn't remember that he was in Starfleet, because I thought in the original series he was on some planet and he dies from like the fake jellyfish alien attack thing. Yeah, so I thought Sam Kirk, Kirk's brother, died on a planet like where there's all the fake jellyfish things like stuck to the walls and stuff. I just didn't remember him being in Starfleet. Anyway, here he is. He's got a great little mustache, so I'm excited to see Sam Kirk. All right, so overall, they did the silly thing of mutating their faces so they could blend in with the native population, which was silly, but was very Star Trek, so it worked. And then Spock Vulcan neck pinched some people very, very quickly, which was a little weird, but again, very Star Trek. The music was great. The costumes were great. All the actors are good. I was a little annoyed at some of the 21st century references, but they tied it together in a way that actually still felt like Star Trek. It was a little bit preachy, but in the Star Trek world, it is already pre-established that there's destruction. I don't know if the Second American Civil War was always a part of Star Trek. Maybe you can correct me on that. But definitely the eugenics war in World War III have always been a part of it. Okay, so I'm going to say it. I liked the first episode, and I'm excited to watch more. I hope it doesn't go the way of Star Trek Picard Season 1, because that was borderline traumatizing how awful it was. But so far, I like it. I like the crew. I like the prequel-ness. And I really want to see how Captain Pike acts knowing his destiny. It's kind of an interesting twist. I didn't know they were going to do that. Anyway, this guy needs to go to bed. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think, and I'm gonna keep watching the show. So I'm excited to try it out. Anyway, thanks. Bye.